It had been 20 years since UCLA had won a national title when Ed O'Bannon and the Bruins cut down the nets in 1995. 14 years later, O'Bannon, who had been named the most outstanding player of the tournament in 1995, filed a lawsuit against the NCAA and something called Collegiate License Company, known more by CLC, for violating something called the Sherman Antitrust Act. EA Sports, for those of you who remember EA Sports, which had licensed the NCAA basketball 2009 from the NCAA, created a player that looked just like Ed O'Bannon. He was left-handed, bald head, all of it. The problem was no one, EA Sports, CLC, even the NCAA, asked O'Bannon for his permission to use his likeness, so he sued. And from that point forward, after he won a lawsuit in 2014, college players, current and former, have been clawing back a name, image, and likeness, something called NIL. Maybe you've heard of that. In 2021, the Supreme Court heard a case called the Alston case. Now, a lot of people, maybe around the edges, know what the Alston case was. Well, in 2021, everybody knew what it was because the Supreme Court ruled unanimously against the NCAA. And from that point forward, players could be paid, and it was like a gold rush, okay? What does that mean for everybody in college sports right now? Where am I talking about $20 million coming from? There is now litigation that is coming to a close that the NCAA has entered into an agreement with some plaintiffs. In order to come to a conclusion of the lawsuits that are surrounding the NCAA and settle down what has been a wild half decade in the last 5 years of college sports, collegiate sports, when you think about the transfer portal, the NIL, all of these things, the NCAA, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the ACC, and what's left of the Pac-12 have all agreed to a class action settlement that grants payments of up to 22% of the average revenue from those leagues, schools, to be paid to players. And that number, the 22% on average, people don't know exactly what it will be because it's an average of all the Power 4 schools, is about $20 million. What is Georgia's athletic budget right now? Before the real big NCAA, before the big SEC money starts rolling in over time, it's about a little bit shy of $95 million. So what's going to happen now? Georgia is going to have to take of that $195 million and pay out $20 million to its athletes. That's about 11% of revenue from the school. That's a lot of money. Okay, that's 11% of their budget. That's a lot of money, and Georgia's not the only one that's going to have to get around this. So, what does this all mean? Like, what's the point? They got to pay players now. Yeah, they do. Like the school does, not Dean Legge through an NIL deal or some company or Wendy's or whatever. Nope, it's going to be the University of Georgia paying their players. I should add, in addition, that for those of us who played sports in college, there is now a clawback. If you were in, the NCAA basketball game, you're going to get paid. If you missed out, so this settlement, the approximate payments to players. Let's just take Tim Tebow as an example. Tim Tebow or Johnny Manziel, Tim Tebow, Cam Newton, those kind of guys. I'm using an average here. They will, on average, get paid $91 million for NIL. Okay, they will get paid about $4,000 for the video game usage. They will get paid about $17,000 for quote lost opportunities, and then they will get the way I read this, approximately another $40,000 on average for quote additional compensation. Now, none of the players have to agree to this to get it, but you do have to opt out. And the opt out is the hard part, okay? Now, I should add that the NIL range was from $15,000 to $250,000. The video game was from $300 to $4,000. The approximate average for, quote, lost opportunities was $17,000, and that range is from less than $1 to $800,000. Now, you can imagine what Tim Tebow getting a sponsorship with Budweiser would be $800,000 back in the day, or Johnny Manziel and, whatever company, that would be certainly almost $1 million. The additional compensation, I'm not quite sure what that would be as it relates to, but maybe just, they're just trying to close this era. This was the era from 95 on that I played in college, and we could not get paid. I've talked about this a little bit. If you got paid in anything, like it didn't matter what it was, you had to report that to the school, and I'm assuming the school kicked it on up to everybody else. So now, what does this mean moving forward? It means every year from here on out, 20% of the revenue, $20 million or so of the revenue that comes into the institution is going to have to be paid out. And I can tell you right now, the schools are freaking out. Straight up. The schools are freaking out for sure because they have never had to do this before. It's a double whammy. It's not just that they're having to pay players, which, they went around the world talking about how these players should not be paid. They went around the world about how these were student athletes. They went around the world talking about this, that, and the other when we were in college, about all of these things. And then they agreed in 2024, this is the lawsuit that is settlement in the lawsuit right here between the NCAA, what's left of the Pac-12, the Big Ten, the Big 12 Conference, the Southeastern Conference, and the Athletic Coast Conference. It is an agreement or a motion dated September 5th, 2024. So there's a lot of things happening right now. We've entered budgeting season at all these schools. It's almost March. You have to pass your budget by, 2 weeks before the end of July 1st, so middle June. And there's, procedure. You got to this budgeting season. I know it well. And it's that time of the year. And people don't quite know how to do things for next year because this proposed settlement has not been settled yet. Not yet. Very close. But there are some stragglers that are involved, including a former football player from Mississippi. So that's one thing that's going on right now is there's uncertainty still. And this settlement would give certainty to the schools. They could absorb the blast that is this, I think it's a $2.8 billion settlement, $2.8 billion NCAA antitrust settlement that would be paid out over 10 years. And then you've got the approximately $20 million a year. If you think the coach that you hate the most at your school is going to get fired, you are probably mistaken. Why? Because the so-called money that's flowing around everywhere, it's not flowing around like it used to. The heyday of collegiate sports in terms of cash for the schools, that has severely regressed. It's probably not over, but it's severely regressed. And I remember talking to an athletic director in the Southeastern Conference in the last few years. And we just, we were just talking about people's misunderstanding of money, revenue, and sports and so forth. And that person said to me, $1 million is a lot of money to us. And this person was not out of school. That's a small school. Okay. In my background, I played at a very small school. I was on the board of trustees at that school for 9 years. Our budget was about $24 million a year. That would mean we would be in this scenario paying out almost $1.5 million a year. That would cripple us. And these schools are going to have a hard time. Any business you're running where you weren't paying 11% at the beginning of the year before, and now you're suddenly paying 11% more. Talk about inflation. You want to talk about inflation? These schools are going to have a real challenge moving forward. So I've already heard behind the scenes at Georgia that there's going to be a lot of figuring out how to raise revenue. If you thought your tickets were going up, Georgia's already said that. But if you think they're going to do anything other than go up, you're incorrect. Why do you think Georgia took the deal to play Florida and Jacksonville forever? That's a $10 million a year deal off the top of my head. Okay, why do you think Georgia Tech is taking $10 million to play Georgia at the Dome? Why? Well, it's not that complicated to understand all of these things when you realize what's really going on. So Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, Texas Christian, schools in the ACC not named Florida State and Miami, they got problems. Excuse me, Florida State and Clemson, they got problems. Vanderbilt, I don't know, but this is a real new situation. And, when, first of all, I think it's the right thing. And the schools, here I go ranting, okay? Just buckle in. The NCAA, whenever you get mad at the NCAA, just get mad at your school, because the NCAA is your school. The NCAA is nothing more than the schools, okay? If you get mad at the SEC, that's your school. Your school is participating in this racket, which is what it's been for decades. And so when the players have seen the amount of revenue, not the coaches are taking home. I mean, the coaches, okay, whatever. I mean, Kirby Smart makes $13 million a year. The schools are pulling in, the Georgias, Ohio States of the world are pulling in $200 million in revenue, okay? And north of that. The contracts to put these players on television are worth billions of dollars. And Stetson Bennett can't get paid. So now, what is the math per player? Well, that's harder to know the answer to, because in talking to a lot of reporters that are tied into this sort of stuff, when you start talking about $20 million, okay, there are 85 players who are on scholarship, and that's not going to change in the SEC. We don't know how much of that $20 million, and again, these are round numbers. We don't know how many of those players are going to get paid, because the payments have to go to all of the student athletes, not just the football players. But sort of the discussion, because each school can handle it each ways. I know I'm aware of one ACC school that plans on paying the sports all very similarly. That's going to be really challenging if you're trying to compete in sports that are on television. And I say that as a person who played a sport on television and a sport that was not on television. One brings in revenue and the other one's just there. No offense to me or other people like me. I mean, it's just what it is. So if you were to take the $200 million and divide it by 85 scholarship players, that would be about $235,000 per player at Georgia. Is each football player at Georgia worth Georgia paying them $235,000? My argument would be no. I would say almost certainly no, but let's take Georgia out of it. Let's talk about a school that has really good sports in basketball and football, Alabama. All right. Alabama cannot possibly pay all of its football players $235,000 and none of their number 2 ranked basketball team any money. So that's the dichotomy that's going on here, is that some schools are going to decide what is right for them, and others are going to say this is different. This is what's right for us. This is only, for the record, this is only money coming from the schools. This is not NIL money. This is not Dean and Keeley have an event at Red Zone. That's not what this is. Those opportunities are still out there. But very specifically for the schools, the hiring of athletic department personnel, whether it's men's or women's basketball coaches, quite clearly, football coaches, you'd better get those hires right from here on out, or you're going to be paying out a lot of money. Why do you think Florida kept Billy Napier? Part of it was that they played better as the season went on. Part of it is that he has a big buyout, y'all. I mean, if you've made a mistake with your coach, you got some problems, and that's the real challenge here, is that athletic departments, specifically, I would say athletic directors, have not had to be great. They've not had to be great. They better be pretty good from here on out. So like Brian Kelly, Hugh Freeze, people that are kind of, Billy Napier, Mike Gundy. I mean, Billy Napier's buyout coming into December 1st, 2024 was $26.7 million. There was probably no shot he would get fired. Just wasn't going to happen. And, like, for instance, Greg Schiano at Rutgers, $28.6 million coming into December 1st. These sort of crazy, buyouts, situations, they would be significant blows. It would be something you couldn't do. Think about Kentucky's situation. John Calipari left, but I can tell you right now, they are not happy with Mike Stoops right now. Excuse me, or Mark Stoops, his brother, who actually happens to be the head coach. Mark Stoops' buyout is $44.4 million going into December of 24. So these sorts of things are going to have to be structured differently from here on out. Like getting rid of Brian Kelly next year would cost LSU almost a quarter of their revenue. Kalen DeBoer, he just signed a deal. His buyout coming into December was $70 million. Kirby Smarts was 118. Y'all getting ready to fire Kirby. So these decisions are what's going to have to be looked at in the future. But from here on out, if and when this gets put through, this settlement, that's going to be $20 million the schools are going to have to pay out every single year. And again, watch this spring. The legal people feel like this is going to get passed, but there's not certainty that it will get passed. That's number one. Number two, if it does go through, that gives a lot of people time to settle down and be able to structure what they want moving forward over the next 10 years financially, okay? Georgia's in good position financially. Some of these schools are not. Three, if it does not go through, you're going to see a real panic because there's going to be a lot of not knowing what's next. Okay, it could get worse for the schools. It's probably not going to get better. And the part about not knowing what's going on, that's the hardest part. But Georgia's got a $20 million problem, and everybody else does too. Tell me what you think down below. Thanks for watching.